now we get to transition into a exciting thing. We get to just hang out with Ange tonight, and she's just going to share a little bit of part of her life, and we're going to get to share a little bit of part of our lives. So if you would give it up for Miss Ange Bender and give her a round of applause, please, as we bring her up. So my question is, if Greg's away, who's I
have the markers.
Oh, don't no one tell Greg. He'll never go to New York again.
I'm going to take a picture of him just for those, well, the only person that doesn't know is Linda, let's just be honest. I'm not allowed to use the whiteboard markers. That's our deal. Greg's here, he does the whiteboard. But since he's not here, he's in New York, I'm going to go crazy with the whiteboard markers. I actually have no clue, but I know, I'm going to use actual color instead of just, yes. That's hilarious. Maybe you girls should do the whiteboard.
I vote yes for that.
In fact, why don't we grab 2 stools? Why don't we grab 2 stools for you gals? You can just sit up here and just write whatever you hear happening that goes into like some sort of collage-y kind of thing.
Do it!
Yeah? You're okay with that? Oh, really? You don't? Okay, we don't have to. Anyway, but we are going to grab a stool. So I know, right? I thought that was such a great idea. So worship was so fun. Jocelyn, thank you so much for picking those songs. The one from The Greatest Showman, I don't know about you all, but that just kind of like, I remember watching in the theater The Greatest Showman. I was actually sitting next to Nikki, and I was freaking out watching The Greatest Showman because I felt the Lord like saying to me, are you prepared to host like a freak show? And I mean that in like a place that is magical, but challenging, and a place that is off the, it's unusual. And are you willing to do that? And I remember my heart just pounding, because also what was in the movie was that it was so, controversial, and I just felt the Lord just so inviting me into something that isn't going to be understood by everybody and isn't going to be valued or appreciated, but it doesn't make it any less magical or amazing. So I don't know if the Lord has done that with you in certain places of your life, but we invite you into something that not everybody gets, and not everybody appreciates, and not everybody understands, and not everybody applauds, and yet you can't deny that there's something sweet and beautiful and magical and filled with His presence. So that was really fun. And then the second song about, and inviting Heather, she might have run to the restroom. I'll save that for when she comes back. So anyway, I'll talk about music again in a second. But I'd like to take a moment while our kids are still in the room and just hear from like 1 or 2 people if they have something that they feel like God's doing in their life that they want to share. So, and it's okay if you don't. We're going to have other times to share. So, yeah, Linz, I thought maybe you might. And we have a mic that is here. So, hooray. Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I see that. I see you doing. I see you getting up and making that happen. Thank you. Okay.
I hosted a group of ladies at my house this week. It's a Christian kind of book study I'm part of. And I asked a question, and the whole moment just has unnerved me ever since. I asked these people, when's the last time you felt the love of God?
Oh, yeah.
You guys, I was a freak show in that moment. They looked at me like I had 3 heads. Well, what do you mean? Like when I'm seeing, no, not when you're loving God. When you feel God love, when was the last time you felt God love you? I haven't stopped crying. Like, I don't know why, I can't let it go. They said, we don't understand the premise. And I know I'm a feeler, and I know that doesn't translate, so I'm like, when's the last time you thought God loved you? Like,
right.
I don't know. And I said, then what are you doing? Why are you doing any of this? Like, what's in it for you? And like, it was that moment that I felt like the Holy Spirit go, yeah. exactly. Like, I want them to know how much I love them. And look, the faces were so blank. And I went, am I the freak show here? Am I the weird one? I don't know. But I mean, I'm going to have to take a lot of time with that moment and go, what was that? What was in that place for them, and what are they experiencing? If it's not love, is it safety? Is it secure? Like, I gotta get to the bottom. I don't know. That's all I know. But when I saw that song, then I went, oh, right.
How he loved.
I kind of do see things a little bit differently, possibly, than other. I didn't think that was a strange statement to say, but like, the world, there's so much the world still has yet to taste. And that saddens me and excites me simultaneously.
Totally.
Because I know that's what God's doing.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Does anybody else have a comment on that, or for themselves, that they just want to share about what God's doing with them? All right. Oh, I'm going to wait on you, Ann, and we're going to come back right to you as soon as kids go. So I just felt like a release for the kids, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So kids may release. And Christy, do you have anything that you want to share about what's happening with kids this week? You don't have to this week. You can share another time. Okay, awesome. And Jocelyn, are you heading also? All right, thank you so much. So go be champions, game changers. Kids who are powerful and kind and good. Go, baby. And Staufers who are beautiful and good. And apparently, like, put on their shirts, what does it say? Love to smile. Love that. Love your smile. Yay. All right. Please get coffee. We have coffee, creamer, so feel free to make yourself comfortable. Water. Move to a different spot. If you're like, I'm too far out and disconnected, just move. It's totally fine. And Ann, we're going to hear something that you wanted to share. So Kristen, do you mind giving Ann?
This is a story from back in the 80s. I was a labor and delivery nurse with midwives in San Diego, and it was my very first job in this area, and so I never learned how to do any of it. Was like I was just learning. And this particular delivery, I was the nurse, but I had a mentor nurse who'd been training me. And that day she said to me, okay, so today I'm just the mouse in your pocket. You know, in other words, she wasn't going to be in charge. I was in charge, and she was just going to be a resource person. So when I realized that the midwife that was supposed to come to deliver this baby wasn't going to make it, I looked at her and I said, so what size gloves do you wear? Because I'm putting out gloves to prepare for the delivery. And she looks at me and she says, no, what size gloves do you wear? I'm just the mouse in your pocket. Now, I tell you this story because the Lord used that story for me today. When I just had been musing over my week with him. I had a long drive today, and so I was like musing over the week, and I was thanking him for some different things. Like one thing that happened this week, it always just seems like the drama can't get any more dramatic, but it just keeps getting more dramatic. So I had one more layer of drama, and I just woke up and I said, Lord, I can't do this anymore. I literally have no resources. I can't do it. And he just kind of, it was like in that moment, I just said, so it's grace or nothing, you know? And immediately, I literally was like, said it with such a deadpan face, and I was like, so not energetic to do anything. And in that split second, it was like he just overwhelmed me with joy. So that feeling of knowing that you've been loved by God. So I was musing about that, and while I was musing about that, I was telling him how important it was for me that he would show up big in the lives of all these people that I love, and I want them to see him and to know how much he loves them. And he just looked at, it's like he turned to me and said, I'm the mouse in your pocket. You need to show up big. that blew me away. That just blew me away. Does anybody else get what I just said? Because that just blew me away. I am still sort of like, whoa, the Lord really needs us to be us in the world. He needs us to be us. And when Jesus came, he came to represent the Father. Guess what? That's our same role. We come to represent the Father. When we live large, when we live our fullness, the way that he created us to be, we actually represent the glory of the Father. I was like, I don't know. He wouldn't let me pray in any kind of a, like, you need to do this and you need to do that. It was like, he was like,
yeah, it doesn't
nope,
work that
I'm
way.
the mouse in your pocket. So
That's really good. It's really, really good. I loved, thanks, Kristen. Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing that. I love what both of you are sharing. I love what you shared. What I was going to say, but you were gone for a second, Heather, was that when you danced, I was so grateful for that. We had a song happen a couple weeks ago, and I was like, where is Heather? I want her to dance for me, you know, like in the way that I pretend I can dance. In my head, I dance like you dance in real life. And it was so freeing to see you dance so beautifully. And I remember the very first time I ever tried to dance and worship. Can I just tell you how horrifying that was for me? It was so awkward, and it felt so fake and shallow and wrong and gross and ugh, and thank goodness I was all by myself, you know, so that's all, you know. And my mentor had said, I want you to dance before the Lord, and I was just like, please just kill me. Like, seriously, you can just cut off a limb. I'd rather do that. I don't even know why it was such a big deal, but it was such a big deal. And it was just horrible. And the song was, I think, 3 minutes and 37 seconds, just ballpark it. And it was like the longest, almost 4 minutes of my life, you know, that song. And getting to that place of being free with him has been such a long journey. And then the last song, which many of you know, was How He Loves. Know that that's the song where I really felt the Lord love for the first time. So in that question, you know, of going, you know, when was the last time you felt the Lord's love? And for people in the whole room to go, what are you talking about? I remember asking that question about 15 years ago when I was in a small group, and I said, so we're doing all this study, but when is the last time any of us really felt the Lord love us, right where we're at? And everyone just went, I don't know that I've ever felt that. And I was like, well, that's what I want. And it was before I had learned about Graham Cook. It was before I had met someone that kind of really exemplified, y'all know, you know, that kind of thing for me. And so that song, How He Loves, was that where I was sitting in my living room just going like, I will be here because I want to feel you. And then it broke through that you know, and I had spent so many nights in my office listening to just really, really bad Christian music, you know, and then some good Christian music. But then that song happened, and it was that thing, and all of a sudden, these things, you know, that seem heavy or eclipsed by glory, and I felt his love finally, really powerfully. I know many of you know that story, and so I love that God gets vulnerable with us. I love that he gives us a space. I just felt like this was like a journey, you know, musically, in some of that like journey. And it felt like it matched so beautifully with what I felt like he wanted us to do tonight. And then you shared that. So Linz, and then you shared that, which is, what is, you know, God going, okay, let me be in your pocket. What, you know, so on that note, grab cards, grab papers, engage at whatever level feels comfortable. Apparently you have a plethora of papers, so, you know, just go with whatever. And I want us to process together, because the last 2 weeks, I did like some significant sharing. I don't know if any of y'all remember that. Had a little bit of a, Brene Brown, I now learned, she calls it a vulnerability hangover. which is the day, what she feels like after she's been super vulnerable. She calls it a vulnerability hangover. So is anyone with me on doing the board? Were you wanting to do that, Taylor? It's up to you.
Unless you girls.
Well, I was going to let the girls. Okay. Taylor, you were going to do it.
I could use the helper.
Okay.
Want me to do it or not?
So if you put vulnerability up on the board. How do you define vulnerability? Don't everybody talk at once. That's okay. How do you define vulnerability? So we talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about vulnerability. I got really vulnerable and shared how I have felt just crushed by the weight of some situations and didn't know what to do, and just told Jesus, like, I need you to come be with me. And I sat with him in the van, and for anyone who wasn't here, I reached over and I held the armrest like I was holding his hand. And I would like to say like it felt totally like his hand. It wasn't. It was just the armrest, but it also was his hand. And I just started to cry. And I realized that what I had been feeling that I couldn't carry the weight of anymore was shame. I didn't even know that I was feeling shame. He like helped me discover that I was feeling shame. And then I went, well, I don't even know what to do with that, but I'm pretty confident that shame is pretty much what sin is just shame. And that was carried on the cross. So apparently you've carried all of this so you can help me with this, because I can't carry it. Anybody felt crushed under the weight of, some sort of emotion? And then you all know, I went home and Jesus pointed out a Brene Brown video on Netflix, and we listened to, and he started processing and talking to me about shame and vulnerability and courage and creativity. So I want to ask you guys, what does vulnerable mean to you? Yes, I love it. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, all four.
I think in my mind, it's when you
go big.
Basically tell or reveal like a truth about yourself without I wouldn't say without concern for the consequences, but without trying to protect yourself from the consequences of that.
Okay.
Of people's reaction to the truth of who you are or where you're at.
Okay, good. Thank you. You and Brene are.
Another word would be like authentic, like showing what's authentically true about your feelings.
Yeah, I mean, mine's similar to Adrian's, like, do what you're going to do without caring about what other people think.
Yeah. Do what you're going to do without caring about what people think. So good. Bethany, you had something you were going to share.
It's like intentional exposure.
Yeah. It's so much harder than you think, right? You think Greg is just a pretty face. But no, getting that mic around's a big job.
There's a lot of them tonight, too.
One, besides the words that the others have spoken, I think honesty has a lot to do with it. Being honest about who you are, both strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. That's so good.
I think
I'm loving this.
Showing up when I don't feel like it.
That's super good. Anybody else want to say anything? So we often, or can occasionally, identify ourselves as feeling vulnerable. Feeling vulnerable feels like what to you?
Being naked.
Naked. Is that a good feeling? Or
Depends on who I'm with.
Okay. I like the first laugh and the delayed laugh. It's so true. Okay, what else? You can put that on there. Feels like. What else does it feel like? You feel judgment?
Unsafe.
Unsafe. Scary. Yeah, Bethany.
Sometimes it feels like death.
Sometimes it feels like death. Yeah. That's good. Anyone else?
I might add
Weak. So I'm going to be vulnerable with you, I think. I think this is vulnerable, I'm not really sure. I don't even know. I used to get excited about vulnerability. I had a really good track record on vulnerability in my life. When I was vulnerable, good things happened. Bad stuff became better. Bad stuff became less bad. So my experience in the past, now I'm not saying that I was hugely vulnerable, not really even sure. I think it's hard to self-assess. I think, how do you know that, right? People are like, well, what are your motives? I'm like, how would you know, right? I mean, really, truly, how would you know what your motives are? You know what you think your motives are, but then there's all the stuff under the surface that motivates us that we're unaware of. So it's kind of like that. I'm not really sure how vulnerable I was. I thought I was super vulnerable, and many, many times, until this last year and a half, where I have been vulnerable and exposed my thoughts and my ideas and my journey and my life and my passion for the Lord and my hopes and my dreams with people, and I didn't realize I had an expectation of the outcome, but I did. I had an expectation of the outcome. The expectation of the outcome would be that it was good. Quote good, meaning that they would all think that I'm awesome. I'm just going to say that. And I discovered that it was way more risky than I ever thought it was. And I also discovered that when that push-pull happened, I withdrew. And I did it without even realizing that I'd done it. Right? Anybody with me? Because, and I'm not even really sure. I mean, I still have more work to do in this area, but anybody got a thought for themselves, not for me, but a thought on yourself in terms of being vulnerable? And I love, you guys, the definition that you gave is really close to what I think Brene Brown has talked about, which I think is a really great, if you go to Wikipedia, it will basically be exposing, and it's actually synonymous with a perception of weakness and an inability to control an outcome. Not meaning that you are weak, it just means that vulnerable is described as weakness. It's a synonym for weakness. Like, this child is vulnerable to illness, right? They aren't strong. So we in our society have chosen to link weakness with vulnerability instead of linking vulnerability with strength. So like even in military, if you are militarily vulnerable, what does that mean? You're at risk. You're at risk. Yeah, it's something you need to fix. So our culture has chosen to link vulnerability with weakness rather than it being this is a choice of strength, an exposure from strength. Isn't that interesting? So, any thoughts or comments? Yeah, Adrian. Yes, Kristen, go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's both. Well, yeah, the phrase that keeps springing to mind is where Jesus says, "Don't cast your pearls before swine, or they'll be just trampled. They won't be appreciated; they'll be trampled underfoot." And I think that our vulnerability, our authenticity is like a pearl that we need to be judicious about how who we give that to, because some people and if using the military analogy, there are it was seen in movies where there's some points where the hero just throws down all his weapons and goes okay, take your shot, and that changes the heart of the whoever it is they're dealing with, because they realize, okay, this there's this person being vulnerable. But it's very easy to see in other situations, if you throw down all your weapons, it's like, and then you get a bullet in the head, and that's the story's over. And I think that's like that in when we're being vulnerable with ourselves. So we choose the wrong audience, some people will just trample us. And so the outcome isn't what we're looking for. So, and it's, I think it is. I think it's wisdom to, who do we give those pearls to? And it won't always work out, and especially if it's a big audience, it's going to be a mixed reaction, and then it's like, okay, well, I'll throw these pearls out. Some, hopefully some of these will actually be appreciated and used and have an impact. There's some people that are going to not appreciate this and trample on it, and then it's kind of like, well, is it for the good that will be done? Am I willing to be trampled by the few, to help the many? But yeah, that's probably enough from me.
That's so good. Well, I love, how you just know the Holy Spirit's moving on things. So one of the things that I was hoping we could talk about was armoring up. So thank you for just listening to I love that. I love when ding, 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 right? When the Holy Spirit just moves in a group and goes, let's just move our thoughts, and we're just kind of in this sync together. So if you wouldn't mind putting wisdom up there, because there is wisdom. And what we often do sometimes regarding vulnerability is we consider vulnerability actually laying down our armor. It's actually an analogy that Brene uses, is laying down your armor. And we also can consider when we start to feel defensive, we find ourselves armoring up. I discovered that I armor up, with facts. I start arguing facts with people when I'm feeling threatened. And I somehow think that this is going to super move people. Let's discuss the facts. They're unhappy about ... Well, let's talk about the facts. Guess how successful I am with this strategy, by the way? Almost none. Anybody with me on the facts thing? Come on, just somebody tell me that they also armor up with facts. Okay, just a couple of you? Okay. And I don't know why I keep using this strategy, because it's almost never successful. It's successful when I'm not defensive. But when I'm defensive, it's never successful. Isn't that interesting? So I go to the tools, when I'm being invited into vulnerability, that don't work when vulnerability is necessary. It's super, super interesting. So thoughts and comments on what is the armor, and then, and Heather, you wanted to make a comment too. So go ahead and make your comment, and then we'll come back to the armor.
I had two instances this week that I was thinking about when you were bringing up vulnerability. I have two new friends, and one of them I kind of put myself out there for. It was, it's and I didn't, I felt like I was being vulnerable, and then I was disappointed when it wasn't returned, and then I was like, I think that's the point, is not having an expectation of a response and being okay of being misunderstood.
La 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 la, I'm not listening to you. No, that's excellent.
Because then the second one,
that's, can you go ahead, put that?
Being okay with being misunderstood.
Expectation and being okay with being understood. That's super good.
The second
let's just pause for a second. Okay. So you're finding help in letting go of your expectation of how that's going to go. And also that you may choose to be vulnerable and it just still isn't understood. That's
and then
super
before
good.
I would have taken it personally and thought that was something about me. And now I was like, you know what? I'm still magnificent, whether he or they think so or not. And I'm okay. I know my worth, and I'm okay with what I put out there. And it, just because it wasn't reciprocated doesn't mean I'm less than. And then the other time, I put something out there and it could have been misunderstood and it was received. But I was thinking of that. But would I be okay if it wasn't? I think that's such a growth, and I think that just comes with practice and knowing who you are and being more confident in who you are and how awesome we each are to be okay with. Oh, well, that's on them, their response. It doesn't have anything really to do with me. So I thought it was a big win for me this week.
It's a really big
not
win.
Taking it personally and thinking, you know what, I'm still I'm still good.
Yeah, that's good. Did you have a second one, or did you combine that in there? You combined it in. Okay, because I don't want to miss out on that. We'll go there, and then we'll come back to you, Ann.
I don't want to move us in a different direction at all.
Just share what you're sharing.
It has so much to do with when we were creating our identity as children, how our vulnerability was met. And like for me, I was praised for mine, and that's why it's probably easier for me than other situations and people in different family structures. And what I found with other things that were not met well is the Lord showing me childhood memories, bringing them back to mind. So like as I'm struggling with something, I just ask him, where did this originate in me, in my life? And he'll bring back very clear memories that I had forgot about in the attempts of healing that origin and saying, you're no longer that child. You no longer need that protection. You are an adult. You are protected by me. You are free to be as vulnerable, you know, as you need to be. And that's been really helpful too, because there is something that does sometimes need to be unlocked in our memories.
Yeah, that's so good. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
I just, when we were talking about being misunderstood, and yeah, so I don't know how it was exactly that I was raised, because I don't remember my childhood very well, but the fact is that I practiced vulnerability to an extent that it put me at risk. And so I was misunderstood a lot. And it created a lot of a need to retract and to hide and to become fearful. And so just this last week, that verse that says, don't throw your pearls before the swine, I don't even know the context of that verse. I haven't had a chance to look it up to remember what exactly the context is, but I thought it was interesting that you happened to say it today, because that verse came to me at a moment when I was feeling really misunderstood, and I suddenly realized that my vulnerability was a pearl, that it was something precious to God, and that I didn't need to give it away quickly, that I could give it away as a choice at the right kind of time. So anyway.
That's really, really good. I know that one of the challenges that we often have is giving away something that we don't actually own ourselves. And often vulnerability is about being authentic, being honest, expressing emotion. But what if we don't know how to be authentic? What if we don't know what we're honestly thinking or experiencing? And what if we're not aware of our feelings? It's very difficult to give to someone else what we are unaware of ourselves. And so then we find ourselves bereft in relationships and marriages and friendships because we're wanting so desperately from someone else something that they are unaware of even within themselves. Or we're unable to give the very thing because we're unaware of it in ourselves. Oftentimes what happens is someone who's super capable in vulnerability marries someone who's super incapable in vulnerability. And they kind of live vicariously through that other person's vulnerability, you know, for a length of time until, you know, they can't do that anymore. So that can, that can happen until it's time for both people to kind of grow up. And for one person to stop living the emotions for the two of them, and for the other person to start identifying theirs. So we're going to take a moment and just be quiet with the Lord and recognize that He is every day wanting to be vulnerable with us. He is every day wanting to expose His feelings, His thoughts, His ideas, His passion to us, and He is willing to not control the outcome. He is so willing to let it rest in our hands for us to do with what we want. So much so that we are allowed to not even know Him or feel Him. And so we forget that He continually is vulnerable with us every day. And in that, leading us to be vulnerable with ourselves and vulnerable with others. So we're going to take just a couple of minutes, maybe about 60 seconds. You can write, you can just sit, and we're just going to have the practice of allowing ourselves to think and feel what the Lord is thinking and feeling, or thinking and feeling what we're feeling, or whatever feels right in this moment. We just release ourselves to you, Holy Spirit.